So hi everybody and welcome back to C++ Thursdays for Absolute Beginners. This is video 287, and in this video I want not to talk about R values, scale values and X values. In my last video I said you should already research this one so that we can talk now about it, but I've figured out there is a big problem about this topic, and the big problem is it is really confusing, and that's why we have to go back and learn it step by step. And it's a little bit theory. I will not go dive into the theory too much because it is also covering some advanced topics which we have not covered here, but we still have to cover it in so that we understand the basics. So if you already understood R value, GL value and X value, you can skip now the coming videos because we start now from scratch, and from scratch means not with this side what I showed you here, because I said you here's the value category. You have just to understand this one here, and then you have just to read this one. Here's the explanation, here are some examples, and that's it actually. And if you're able to understand this already, you are finished. But if not, then we start now not with this one, because we will start, you can see here, it says here in the first sentence, each C++ expression is characterized by two independent properties, a type and a value category. You can see the value category is actually that this key L, P, L and XL what we want learn. But before we can go here, we have also know what is an expression. And normally you would say, wait a minute, why we learn not the value category first and then go to the expression? Because the value category is a part of the expression, right? And the reason why we start with the expression is, let me click this one here up, because expressions we are using in C++. So in our code, we are actually using all-time expressions. That's the reason we start first with the expression, then we know where we use it in our code, what an expression is, how an expression can look like. And let me show you here, we will go here to this side here, expressions. And then you can see it is just expression means this sentence here actually, it is just an expression is a sequence of operators and their operands that specifies computation. And then we have this expression, you can see operators looks like this logical or the function call or even conditionals, and you can see all this kind of stuff. What you can see here, we are already using, or the static cast, or this, what we have here, a new expression, size of operator, and all this kind of stuff we are using in our practical use in C++. So we are using it in our code, so we can point it out in our code, and that's very good for starters. So first of all, when I go in my C++, I want to see what is an expression, and then when I can point out what an expression is, for example, the struct A, the struct itself here is not an expression. The struct, when I talk, oh, I can't select this. Okay, when I talk about the struct here, it's not an expression. Why is struct not an expression, for example? Because a struct is a blueprint, for example, to create an object. But on the other side here, this int n equals 0 would be an expression. Careful. When I say int n equals 0, which is an assignment, it's an expression. What I mean with that, it's also not clear, because the int is a type, n is an identifier, equal is an initializer with the 0. So you can see there are many other things at the same time, but the whole thing here is also an expression, and we will learn this to understand a little bit more in detail. That's why we start first with an expression, so that we can point out in our code what is an expression and what we have to look. And then after we understand what an expression is, we can go back and try to understand what this value category is. The type is probably easy to understand because we have just to identify the type. And in the worst case, how you can identify a type very fast, in the worst case, you just make here a dot and then use the debugger. For example, I go here int, and then I start here the debugger, and then you can watch here when it stops. If you really don't know what the type is, yeah, it will now jump here. Okay, it's not calling this one, so that's why it's not. It is here. You can see, and then we can watch here what the type is. For example, int is indeed, the type is integer, something like that. So you can see that finding out the type would be not the biggest problem, but understanding then what is the value category could be a little bit more a problem. And the reason for that is this diagram here, what I showed you here. And here again, one more note. This diagram here looks very simple, and I thought, hey, that's very good. Actually, that's very bad. After I thought about it again, why is this bad? Normally, something which looks simple is good. The reason why this is bad is because it's only good for people who already learned everything behind the scene. What I mean with behind the scene, they learned already what an R value is. They learned already what an PR value is, an X value, L value, GL value. And what I mean, they already learned, they know what an expression is. They know what these values are. They know how this looks like in code. And then they can watch this little diagram after they learned all this kind of stuff. They watch this diagram as just as a repetition overview, more like that. So with other words, people who already know it, for these people, this diagram is very easy to understand. For beginners who start to learn this one, it looks very simple. It's not so simple because there is a lot of things in here which is not shown. For example, let me make an example. This R value, for example, has no identity. L value has identity. And then what it means, this X value here with identity and no identity, and then all this kind of stuff can be confusing. And this is the reason why I made this long introduction now, and say the next thing what you should watch is here the expression, what an expression is, because we will start with an expression. And important, we will watch here code examples, which is this, for example, you can see, so that we can actually point out in our code what an expression is, what is not an expression. And after we finish this one, we jump to the value categories and point out what this expression, because this expression has a value category, and what this value category is in this situation. So for example, here again, my example, struct is not an expression. This one is an expression. And then you can say, okay, what is the value category of this expression? And then you can say, after we learned this would be an L value. And later, now you don't know why, but later you will understand why this is an L value and, for example, not something like an PR value or an R value or whatever. All right, with that said, sorry for the long introduction here again, but I think it's very important because this topic is very confusing. It looks very simple when you watch this one, but it's very confusing, and I think it's good that we cover this in the basics already a little bit. Again, we will not dive too much into depth because we learned the basics, but at least we learned the basics here, this expression and this value categories in combination, which we identify in our code. With that said, I stop here the video. And if you have questions like old time, write it in the comment section. See you in the next video. Bye, good luck, and like old time, have fun and never give up.